welcome back to another lesson. In this one we're going to talk about risk management. Now this one is important, so this is one that you really need to focus on. So risk management is the systematic process of identifying, analysing and responding to project risks. A risk is any uncertainty that can impact the project objectives, whether positively or negatively. Now, most risks that you encounter will be negative. Now, some frameworks do also bring in positive risk because there is a risk of something happening. So, there is a mention there whether you're constructing a skyscraper. So a positive risk would be, let's say there is a technical breakthrough and someone invents a much faster setting concrete, which is going to massively change your timeframes. That's great. That is a risk of something happening that has impacted your project in a positive manner. Now, a lot of the time, those things are very hard to quantify and define. You don't really plan for those normally. Sometimes you can. If you're aware of something coming, you can include it. But most risks that you will be working with will be negative risks. Now, risk management goes beyond simply avoiding dangers. It involves proactively addressing potential challenges while also leveraging unforeseen opportunities. So, from small-scale projects to large, complex initiatives, effective risk management is key to ensuring success. And it's all about going through risk management all the way through the project, from the very start to the very end. You need to be doing this all the way through. So by mastering risk management, you gain the tools to predict challenges, prepare for them, and guide your project towards success, no matter how turbulent the environment may be. Because no matter how turbulent the environment is, if you plan effectively and you manage those risks effectively and you have a solid plan of what to do when they happen, when they arise, you can work around just about anything. So let's have a look at some key points. So risks are uncertainties that may affect your project in positive or negative ways, normally negative. Now, to manage them successfully, you'll need to classify, evaluate and tailor responses to different categories of risks. So obviously you've got negative and positive risks, threats and opportunities. Now, those will be defined with a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. So negative risks, these are the more common one that you'll be looking at. Events that could harm the project outcomes, i.e. a resource shortage delaying construction, or a resource shortage delaying anything, or a third-party supplier delaying the delivery of kit. Could be anything. Anything that's going to have a negative impact on your project. These are the things that you need to really focus on. Now, there are positive risks, events that could benefit the project, so a technical breakthrough. That is something that could happen. Most of the time it's not something that you plan for unless you have a bit of foresight around something that might happen. So types of risk. You've got technical risks, challenges related to the complexity or innovation level of the work. If you're in a very technical field, IT, software development, anything like that, there is going to be technical risks because what you're doing is highly technical and could be highly advanced and essentially very difficult. External risks. Political, environmental or economic factors outside of your control. Are you delivering a project into a company that has some political unrest or economic problems? Could that then have a knock-on impact of your project? If so, that needs to be classified and that needs to be taken into account. Organisational risk. That could be changes to the organisation, both internally in your own organisation and also the customers, because that can have a big knock-on impact in a smooth project delivery. If you've got a single point of contact with the customer and they then leave, if it's a very tough project to understand, the next person being onboarded might take a long time to understand, might not be able to grasp it. That's going to come with its own challenges and complexities. So organisational risks. You've also got financial risks, which is a big one. We always want to make sure that finances are good. We stay within budget. So uncertain funding, fluctuating costs or currency exchange rates, things that can have an impact on your delivery financially, which you need to make sure you take into account and consideration and plan for them, so you don't end up with a project that's running below budget. Over budget, rather. Below budget is good, over budget is bad. So applications, a technology upgrade mid-project can either increase lifespan or derail current progress. Technology upgrades are, a big one. You know, if you're delivering something into a company, all of a sudden they change their entire infrastructure, their entire backbone, everything they do technologically. If you're integrating something which feeds into that technology, which has just changed, that could have massive impact. But also, it could be a positive change. If they've made that change for the right reason and your system still integrates, everything still works, it somehow makes it better, there is a positive risk of that as well. A skilled professional quitting mid-project can lead to delays or innovation opportunities. So again, you can always spin something. So, you know, if you've got a skilled resource that you've been using for most of the project, it can be a bad thing because you need to onboard a new member of staff. You need to teach them the project. You need to onboard them, make them aware of the scope, the quality levels that are in place, and your entire plan. Or you could end up bringing someone in that has a different way of doing things that you didn't see before, you weren't aware of before, which can then actually tailor your approach to the project and make things better. So risk management lifecycle. This is a lifecycle which is going to enable you to manage proactively and consistently during the project. So like I mentioned, this is for the entirety of the project. You always want to be looking at your risks, managing your risks, making sure that you understand them, and constantly seeing if you can identify any new ones as the project progresses. So the management lifecycle, you identify the risks, you analyse them, you prioritise them, you then plan your response, respond to them, and then you monitor and control, and you just go around that cycle again and again and again and again. So, during a bridge construction project, identifying seasonal floods helps mitigate delays. It's pretty good. A company launching a website may find supply chain delays from third parties a risk early during scoping. So again, just some examples of potential risks that might exist to give you an idea of things that you might be looking for. But this is going to change on a project by project basis, even on a phase by phase basis. As you move from one phase of the project into the other, the risks that you face are going to be different because you're doing different things, you're delivering different things, working with different people potentially, with different teams, different countries, different anything. Things change very quickly in the project landscape. So it's key that you're always looking to identify risks that could have an impact and then moving them through the management lifecycle. So you've got a few identification techniques here. Brainstorming workshops, bringing stakeholders together to list potential risks. Now, that can also mean bringing in internal resource as well, especially if there are people internally that have run similar projects before. It's going to be invaluable to get their lessons learned from previous projects. That is huge. Now, expert judgments also comes into that as well. Consulting industry veterans for real-world risk insights. And again, it's their lessons learned from their previous deliveries, which you can then learn to understand risks that you might have missed. SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It evaluates internal and external environments, and you can categorize things that you see as the strengths and weaknesses of the projects, and then the opportunities and the threats that exist throughout the duration of the project. And that is something that you can just keep doing. You can keep that as a document and continue to add to it, review it, and maintain it as it goes phase to phase to phase. Historical data analysis, reviewing past projects for recurring risks. That's what I mentioned about lessons learned, is looking back at what's happened before when someone has delivered something similar. What risks did they face? because you might have done a full SWOT analysis. You might think you have a full register of risks and a full report with all the risks, but there's always a chance you've missed something. So by doing more of these techniques, it widens the chance that you see something. It widens your net to catch these potential risks. So, analysis methods. Once you have identified a risk, you need to then define it. You need to look at how critical it might be. Now, the easiest way to do this, what a lot of people do, is they score it. So you can score a risk. Most people will give it 2 separate scores. One of them is how likely it is to happen. What's the likelihood of this risk actually coming into fruition? And then what's the impact score on the project? And then if you've got something which is quite likely to happen and has a high impact on the project, that's going to have a higher priority than something which isn't very likely to happen and isn't going to have a very high impact on the project. So you can use those scores to help you identify which are the key ones to focus on. You can also use numerical data, obviously, to predict the monetary consequence or impact duration. So this is going to be massive because, budgets are key. Finances are key. You need to make sure that the project you deliver is profitable. And risks, negative risks, can have a very big impact on the financial success of a project. So, risk response strategies. Once you have identified your risk and you've categorized it and qualified it as a risk and scored it, and you feel that you need to respond to it, these are some of the things that you can do. So, avoidance. Changing plans to eliminate a risk entirely. So if you're traveling, let's say you're traveling down a set of roads A to B, and the risk is that there's a road blockage halfway through. So you create another route, you go around it, you eliminate the risk entirely. You're no longer on the same path of the risk, therefore you're not going to meet it, and it's not going to impact it. Mitigation. Reducing the severity or likelihood of risks. So this is if you can't avoid it, how can you mitigate it? How can you put things in place so that you feel that the impact less? Let's say, for example, again, I'm going on a drive and I know that there's going to be traffic, but I've got the choice of a car or a motorbike, and I can't choose which way I go. I can't avoid it. I have to go through this traffic. I can mitigate the impact of traffic by taking the motorbike, because I'm still in the traffic, but I've done something which allows me to operate in a manner where I feel the impact of the risk less. Or acceptance is acknowledging the risks without taking immediate action. So that's in that same situation, but I choose to take the car. So I know that the risk is traffic. It's probably going to be there, and we're just going to have to live with it. Maybe you set off a little bit earlier. That's probably more mitigation. Acceptance is more, there's not really a lot that you can do. It is completely outside of your control. So you just have to accept that it exists and work with it. There are also response strategies of positive risks. Exploitation, sharing, and enhancement. How can you increase the chance of positive risks happening? How can you maximize the potential benefits you get if something does happen? So a few applications. Avoid using unreliable suppliers to meet design deadlines. Perfect if you know that someone has had issues in the past. Again, talking about lessons learned. What's happened in the past? Can we use examples from the past to ensure that we are exposed to the lowest amount of risk possible? If we've had issue with certain suppliers, let's use different ones. Now, in some instances, there's going to be a risk with that because you might only have one supplier and they're unreliable. So you decide to use a new one. But a new supplier comes with its own risk because it's currently an unknown. It doesn't have those data points of are they successful or not. So that is its own risk in and of itself. Mitigate by scheduling actions in low risk slots to reduce weather disruptions. So, if you're out doing work outdoors, a construction piece, if you know that you have to lay concrete, you would want to do that in the summer months. Because if you're trying to allow your concrete to dry and you're doing that during the winter where it's going to be raining, the risk of something going wrong is much higher. So let's reduce that risk as much as possible, do it in summer. Yes, there is still a risk that it's going to rain and the concrete is going to be ruined. But what you can do is mitigate that risk and try and reduce that as much as possible within your realm of control. Share workload risks by outsourcing QA in IT development projects. Very good. That also works with any other project. Can you look to outsource? Can you bring on more resource? Can you reduce the strain on your resource? Or completely outsource something? Because ultimately, if you outsource something, in the truest sense of the word, it becomes their problem. In essence, they get their own project to deliver something back to you, where the risk management, the QA, the QC, it all sits with them. They are then responsible for the delivery. So it removes the stress and the risks associated with this item and gives it to someone else. So a very good strategy. So continuous monitoring and control. Obviously, I've mentioned this. Risks are dynamic. They're not static. They're always happening. They're always changing. They're always popping up. So you need to make sure that you are doing this and following this life cycle all the way through the project. It's not something you do at the start and then you just don't do it because you've done it. It is a constant thing. So communicate weekly, risk assessments and construction blueprints. Yeah, track project risk trends using real-time dashboards. Yeah, things that you can do. Essentially constant communication, constant touch points to look at the risks that you are seeing that you have already identified and see if you can identify every new ones. Constantly, be that weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, depends on the project, but you need to make sure that happens all the way through. Documentation. Most projects will have a risk register, which is a list of risks that you've identified, who's responsible for it, so who's in charge of the mitigation of that risk, or the avoidance, or the acceptance, and the targets and outcomes. What are you looking to do about it? What outcome do you expect to see? And what scores do those risks have attached to them? And then a lessons learned document. So ensure future projects avoid repeat risks. So when you get to the end of the project, they will take documents like your risk register and your lessons learned documentation, which will incorporate the risk register and the risks you saw. And they will use that, or you will use that, to plan your future projects. And it will just get better and better and better every time you do it, because you're going to be adding more information, more potential risks that you can work around. And things should get smoother and smoother and smoother. Now, moving on, you've got some application examples. Again, I'm not going to go through these as previous. You can have a look at these examples, give them a read through, and look at so it's a real world example of what risk management does and what impact it has. So have a look through all these examples here. Give them a read and really try and understand what the principles of risk management have done within these project examples. There's 10 there for you to look at. And now let's have a look at the summary tables and quickly just glance over these. Now, obviously, I always say, read these in some more detail. We will go over them very quickly now, but have a look in a bit more detail. So, risk types, technical risks, external risks, organizational risks, positive risks or opportunities, financial risks. There are also many more. Obviously, political, environmental, economic can be broken out into their own risk types, depending on what type of project you are delivering, how big those risks are. You can create your own definitions of types of risks. You can tailor all this. This is all to be tailored. All these approaches are to be tailored and used by yourself as a project manager to create an approach which works for you and the project that you're delivering. So the lifecycle table, which is the 5 steps: identification, analysis, prioritization, response planning, and then monitoring and control. And that just loops round and round and round and round. So risk identification, some potential techniques here. Obviously brainstorming, workshops, bringing the clients in, bringing in internal resource as well. Industry expert judgments. That could be, people internally once again, or people externally that have done similar things. SWOT analysis, historical data analysis, document reviews can all help identify potential risks. So strategies. You've got some strategies there for both negative and positive risks that we spoke about. Have a look through those and make sure they make sense. Tools and techniques. So you've got risk heat maps to visualize which risks are most critical, most important. Simulation models. Potentially you can forecast the outcomes for the project if certain risks do materialize. Risk registers, like I mentioned, that's where you track the risks, who owns it, what the plan is, what score it is. Everything about that risk will be contained within that risk register. Now, project management software can obviously help coordinate responses, aids in continuous monitoring. If you're tracking your project on a project management software start to finish, you'll have a really good idea of where your project needs to be. Now, as soon as that deviates and things don't happen, it's normally because of a risk. Something has impacted your project negatively. And if you are using PM software, it should be very easy the second that happens to say, right, we have a risk. Something has happened. What is it? Where is it? Is it resource? Is it a deadline that hasn't been met from a supplier? What's going on here? What risk has materialized? And what was the plan that we put in place that we said we were going to action as soon as that happened? You've then obviously got SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. Always a very good session for discussing and really dissecting the project into those areas. And now on to multiple choice questions. Go ahead, give these a go. Have a look at how you do as far as the answers. If you do struggle on any of them, go back through the course, focus in on those bits that do need focus. And if you are still struggling, like I always say, reach out to us. We are here to help. We're here to help guide, help support. So if you do need us, please do just let us know. Just reach out. But have a little go at these questions. Test your own understanding. See where you are. If you need to focus in. And I'll see you on the next one. Take care.